Hey everyone, it's Hans here and happy September. Over the past couple weeks, I've had a lot of people ask me questions about different types of jobs and career paths, including consulting, software engineering, product management, finance, private equity, and even medicine. As someone who's spent time in each of these fields over the past couple years, I wanted to help explain each of these professions in my own experience. Let's dive right in. So I'm going to start off by giving a quick summary of how I ended up where I am today. If you're interested in a single type of job, feel free to jump to that section of this video. Alright, so I started off college as a biology major and also decided to major in computer science economics on top of that. In undergrad, I jumped around. I did a summer internship working in a hospital, I worked in sales and trading at JP Morgan, and I also worked in management consulting at BCG for a summer. Fast forward a bit, I decided to drop out of medical school and work as a software engineer for a venture-backed startup. After a couple months of that, I realized that I did like coding, but I was much more interested in the business side of things. So I went full-time back to BCG. At BCG, did 2 years there, had a fantastic experience, but realized that I didn't want to make partner there, and I also wanted to spend more than 30% of my nights in my own bed. I decided to move to private equity with a focus on tech investing in consumer tech companies, consumer internet companies, and enterprise SaaS businesses. Had a really good experience there, learned a ton, but realized that I was also more interested in focusing on a single company and learning more about the tech that drove that company's value. So recently I actually started as a product manager at a medium-sized tech company, and that's basically where I am today. Alright, let's get started with management consulting. So before we talk about management consulting, I want to distinguish management consulting from a couple other different types of consulting. So there is economic consulting, there is boutique/niche consulting such as healthcare consulting. When I think about management consulting, I'm thinking about McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, Parthenon, EY, their strategy arms, and some of these major players. An analogy I use to describe management consulting is cleaners for an apartment, suite, or living space. So if you've ever lived with roommates, you know that the area gets super dirty. You might hire cleaners because number one, you don't have the time or labor to clean the apartment. Number two, you don't have the expertise to clean the apartment. Let's say you have an apartment that's infested with pests. Or number three, it's just easier for an external third party to clean the apartment. In a similar way, different companies, primarily bigger companies such as Fortune 500 companies or other governments, nonprofits, or even unicorn startups will hire consultants because they don't have the time/resources to solve a problem. They might have a really difficult problem that they don't have the expertise to solve. Or number three, it's just easier for a third party to come in. So let's jump into each of these scenarios now. So let's take a company like Coca-Cola. Everyone's super busy at Coca-Cola. Someone might be in charge of running ads and marketing for Coca-Cola in the United States. Someone else might be taking care of manufacturing of Coca-Cola cans in the factory. Everyone's really busy doing their thing. And let's say that one day we realize we need to figure out what annual demand of Coca-Cola looks like in the next 5 years. That's a lot of work to do. That requires someone to figure out how much Coca-Cola we're selling these days. How do we figure out how much Coca-Cola growth is going to be over the next 5 years and modeling that out. If I'm already the one taking care of ads and marketing in the United States, I don't want to do that extra work. What actually makes sense is bringing in a consultant to come in, pull the data, do the work, and then hand it off as a single project that can then be done. Let's talk through providing expertise now. Let's say Coca-Cola is thinking about potentially expanding to schools. They have come up with this really healthy new drink that they think would be excellent for students at elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. The thing about Coca-Cola is, for the past couple decades, Coca-Cola hasn't worked with schools at all because, let's say, their soda has been unhealthy and schools haven't agreed to buy it. So they have no expertise figuring out how do we price to schools, how do we come up with contracts. This is where BCG comes in. BCG probably already has experience working with different companies, working with education systems to figure out what contracts look like, working with them to figure out how to market to these schools, and they can bring that expertise and help out Coca-Cola. Because consultants work so closely with these different client companies, it actually requires a lot of travel. Things are changing a bit during COVID, but pre-COVID, many times, consultants would be at the client site Monday through Thursday, and Fridays would be back in the home office, but that would mean either train or plane to the client site, staying at a hotel, and really working in the client city. For me, during my time at BCG, I did a lot of different work. I looked into pricing, so helping a company figure out how do we increase prices even though we haven't increased prices for a certain duration of time, and what is an appropriate amount of increase for these potential customers of our client. I also worked on another project where I looked into creating a marketplace. So really difficult problem. How exactly do we build up and stand up a marketplace that connects buyers and sellers? And then a bunch of other different types of projects. I'm not going to dive into them. Product management. So in one sentence, product management is listening to the voice of the customer and continuously improving the experience that that customer has with the product. The product could be literally anything. So it could literally be this water bottle and saying, hey, we need to improve this water bottle by making it easier for people to hold the water bottle. Or it could be a tech product. So you could think of something like DoorDash, Airbnb, etc., etc. When we think of tech products, there's really two types of products. There's current products that are already out in the field, and there are future products that are being built and that will be available to customers sometime in the future. With these two different types of products, there's different types of work that product managers need to do. So with products that are already out there, so let's say DoorDash is already doing restaurant delivery, there needs to be work on both current really pressing issues that are happening right now with the product and potentially larger, longer term issues that DoorDash needs to deal with the current product. The product manager then needs to figure out how to prioritize these different issues. So let's say DoorDash is having a couple big issues right now. Let's say Apple Pay isn't working, or let's say Visa cards aren't working for DoorDash payments. And let's say DoorDash is also not showing the screen where a customer can track, hey, where's my driver? And then let's say another issue is DoorDash menus are loading slowly. So 3 different issues. DoorDash isn't taking Visa payments. DoorDash isn't showing customers where their delivery person is. And number 3, DoorDash menus are loading slower than usual. What a product manager needs to then do is say, hey, what can we target first? Because we have a limited set of resources in terms of engineers, and what can we do later on? In this case, I'd probably say, hey, we need to fix this payment issue first. A lot of people are using Visa. If they can't pay, that means the order is not going through, and that means there are no orders happening. For me, menus loading more slowly or not being able to track the delivery person are less important because people can still get their order delivered and people can still get their food. In terms of more longer term projects for some company like DoorDash, maybe the product manager is thinking through, all right, we're already doing a really great job right now with delivery, but what are some big features that we could potentially add that might take a little bit more time? A good example of that for DoorDash recently is they went from just restaurant food delivery to starting to do grocery delivery. That's something that just doesn't immediately happen. If you think about a restaurant and the kind of food / items that you get delivered from a restaurant, it's very different than the kind of items that you get delivered from a grocery store. There's way more items in a grocery store. There's different types of items. Things are priced potentially by the pound rather than just, hey, let me get my pad thai for $12.50. Because of that, it's a more longer term project. It's one where the product manager needs to figure out, hey, who are the different engineers that need to work on this? How long will this take? Can we get this done within 2 quarters, or how long would it take to do that? And then make sure that all the different parts get put together. In terms of future products, a product manager at DoorDash could be working on maybe a ghost cafeteria. So an example of this would be DoorDash right now, it's only doing DoorDash for restaurants to deliver restaurant food, or DoorDash for groceries to deliver groceries. What if in the future DoorDash wanted to rent out or lease out potentially large spaces where people can go eat, and instead of ordering food from a restaurant close by to this large space, being able to get the food DoorDash directly to this space so that people can still have a dine-in experience with a ton of different restaurants. This is something where a product manager would need to think through, what exactly does this solution look like? what exactly is the vision of this and figuring out how exactly to build out this product. That's something that potentially could take quarters or even years to do, but the product manager is the one who figures out what are the requirements, what's the description of this, and then building that out with the necessary resources. For all of these different products that the DoorDash product manager is working on, they're always thinking about the customer and how to make the customer's experience as delightful as possible. Whether it's figuring out, hey, how do we build out this DoorDash for groceries, or how do we think about these ghost kitchens, the product manager is always talking to different customers, whether it's through calls, A/B tests, or surveys, to make sure that they're understanding what exactly the customer needs, and then translating that to the engineers, to their team, to make sure that it gets implemented and created. Software engineering is actually building out the code that creates the product. There is front-end software engineering, which is building out what's actually visible to you and me. So in this case with DoorDash, being able to see the actual menu, being able to see the checkout flow to pay, that is front-end. Then there's also the back end, which is, hey, like there's probably a database where the menu items are being pulled from. And then there are people who work on being able to pull that database, the items in that database, to the front end. So software engineering is all about building out that code. So software engineers also work really closely with product managers, because product managers tell software engineers what the different things that they should prioritize and focus on are. And software engineers also work fairly closely with designers, who are the people who work on the user interface and the user experience to make sure that the code creates a product that is intuitive and works well for the potential customer / end user of the product. So a couple other random tidbits about software engineering. One of the most interesting things that I found about the software engineering interview experience is most of the questions are actually in an online data bank called LeetCode. So if you are interviewing for Google or Facebook, 90% of the questions that you potentially see during a Google or Facebook interview are actually online in this LeetCode. So a lot of that is really good practice for you to do, similar to potentially preparing for the SATs or for the GMATs, being able to see these questions beforehand and get really good at doing the interview questions. In terms of my experience when I worked in software engineering, I thought other really cool things about it were, although there were daily stand-ups at 10:30 a.m. for 15 minutes, most of the rest of the day was actually deep work time where I didn't have meetings and I could really focus on the work that I had to do. And being able to meet together every 2 weeks with the rest of the team to figure out priorities every 2 weeks helped me stay on schedule and also gave me a lot of time to focus. Finance. So finance is a very loaded term because it can mean a lot of different things. For the context of this video, I'm going to be thinking about finances strictly Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, these big investment banks, and what they're doing. So these big banks have a ton of different verticals. They have an IT vertical, they have an HR vertical, they have a legal vertical, they have a risk vertical. I think the three more common verticals that people probably are more interested in are investment banking, sales and trading, and wealth management. Investment banking is essentially the people who help facilitate a sale of a company to other people. So this can be either private companies or public companies. Investment bankers are spending most of their time either in Excel modeling out how much a company is valued and modeling out what returns for a company look like, or potentially in PowerPoint to basically put all of these insights into a presentation for people to look at. Sales and trading. So the easiest way to think about sales and trading is this is essentially trading different types of assets. So if you think about crypto or NFTs, or probably the most well-known form of asset are stocks. So think Google stocks or Facebook stocks. What happens is there are these big institutions that want to trade and want to make investments to make money. So let's say there's a big hedge fund out there, or there's this big company out there, wealthy family office that wants to buy $10 million of Google stock. Google's super liquid, but if it's a big enough amount of Google stock, it might be difficult to buy the Google stock because there's not just enough available sellers. So what JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs might do is they might help pitch the idea, number one, of buying Google stock, and then two, making sure that there are enough Google stocks out there for the institution to purchase it. Wealth management. So I'm sure some of you are active traders, whether you're using brokerages, Robinhood, Webull, Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and you trade your own stocks. What happens for very wealthy people is they actually ask JP Morgan or other types of wealth management companies to actually trade the investments themselves. Private equity, once again, this is a really big field with a ton of different players in here. Private equity means, honestly, the buying and selling of any company that isn't public. And there are way more private companies in this world than public companies. So venture capital actually classifies as private equity. A good example of companies that are private, BCG even is private right now. If we go back to looking at my water bottle, it's Buzio. Buzio is probably private. So there's a ton of private companies out there, but there are companies called private equity firms that will come and buy a private company and hope to grow that private company before selling it in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, etc. Really, private equity comes down to that, and there's a lot of work because there needs to be diligence done on if the private company's financials look attractive. There needs to be modeling done to say, hey, can we feasibly get 2 to 3 times our money after 5 years of holding this company? How exactly can we grow this company? Is this a winner in the market? There's a lot of different work to be done here. The work that I did in private equity on a week-to-week basis could really be divided into one of 4 different tasks: sourcing, qualitative diligence, quantitative diligence, and operations. So sourcing is really, think top of funnel. When I'm a private equity company and I'm looking for different companies to buy, I need to actually search and see what companies or even companies that could potentially be attractive. What companies are companies that are even looking to be sold. So on a day-to-day basis, I would literally look in the market, see, hey, what are some interesting companies, try to talk to their CEOs or founders and see if they're interested in being sold, and really just do discovery and top of funnel. The second piece is qualitative diligence. So once we find an interesting company, we need to actually assess if it's a company that we want to invest in. And that requires potentially talking to customers of the space, talking to competitors, understanding if this is actually a valuable company that we can see be larger and grow over the next couple of years. The third piece is quantitative diligence. So if we feel good about some of the qualitative diligence that we've done, we're also going to do quantitative diligence. We're going to model out, hey, if we're currently looking at a company that's doing $10 million in revenue, can we actually get really good investment returns over the next couple of years if the revenue is projected to grow at X%, if we're able to cut costs by Y%, and modeling that out just to see if it's an attractive investment. The final piece is if we've done a lot of great qualitative and quantitative diligence and feel comfortable in investing in the company and ultimately do invest in the company, there's operational work. Now that we're actually owners of the company, there needs to be work done to support the company, whether it is with new market expansion, potentially new products, with marketing, with hiring. Private equity firms will try to help in whatever way to make sure that the companies in their portfolio are successful. And finally, medicine. So I'll be honest, I don't know the most about medicine. I never went to residency. I have friends who probably know way more than me, so maybe in the future bringing some of my friends who are residents or in medical school on to answer questions that might be the easiest. I can talk a lot about what exactly the path in undergrad looks like to get into medical school. It means taking pre-medical courses, it means taking an MCAT and then going to a 4-year medical school, then having to do potentially residency and fellowship. I can talk a lot about that, but it is a path that has a lot of requirements in undergrad, that requires a lot of planning. A lot of people actually aren't able to go directly to medical school after 4 years of undergrad. They take a couple of years off to essentially build up their resume, to potentially get ready to take the MCAT, because that process is one that requires a lot of different types of materials, that requires a lot of different types of planning. The average age for medical school nowadays, I think it's 25 to 27, because a lot of people start much later because they need that extra time to have the application ready to be competitive for medical school. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hopefully this was helpful. Please like, subscribe, and comment. If you have any ideas for what you want my next video to be, please comment below. I'm going to take a look at these comments and try to be as helpful as possible. Until next time.